Hello, good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the GSD's virtual public event, a lecture by the Catalan office H Architects or Arquitectes, titled Where the Invisible Becomes Visible. My name is Mark Lee, and for our audience members that may have a low vision, I would like to describe myself and my setting. I'm seated in front of a blank white wall. I'm wearing a blue jacket, a pair of black frame glasses, and my hair is a black and silver pompadour. Okay, mainly silver. A quick reminder about some features you see in this webinar. Roger Trudeau of Arquitectes will respond to questions from the audience after he has finished his lecture. And please feel free to submit questions into the queue at any time by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. We also have live captioning available for this event, so please click the closed caption button at the bottom of your window to turn them on. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to join us for an upcoming GSD public program. Next Tuesday, April 20th at 7:30, we'll welcome Chilean architect Cecilia Puga to give a presentation on the history of her practice and her current work. All lectures will happen on Zoom and require registration. More information about these events, as well as how to register, is available on GSD's website. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm joining in from Los Angeles, the occupied land of the Chumash and Tongva nations. And I'm an uninvited guest on this land and want to recognize those who have stewarded it past and present. As we are all calling from different lands, I would encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge those lands you're on before the program starts. You can use the links provided in the chat to learn more about the land acknowledgements and learn whose land you occupy if you do not already know. Furthermore, today's lecture is supported by the Margaret McCurry Leadership in Design, a fund established to honor Margaret McCurry and her longstanding service to the GSD. This fund enables world-class design practitioners to come to GSD and engage in lectures, symposia, and other kinds of intellectual engagements during the academic year. A native Chicagoan, Margaret is the principal of the design firm Tigerman McCurry Architects and an alumna of the GSD. Thank you, Margaret. And now I'm delighted to introduce Arquitectes, an architecture studio based in Sabadell, right north of Barcelona, founded in the year 2000 by David Laurent, Joseph Ricard, Xavier Ros, and Roger Trudeau. Over the last 2 decades, Arquitectes have created a remarkable body of work that responded beautifully to the varied geographies of Catalonia, ranging from dense city centers to sprawling suburbs and villages. The work from the past decade was recently featured in a monographic issue of El Croquis titled Learning to Live in a Different Way, including many houses, as well as a student housing project at Valles School of Architecture, the Mas Jelly Winery, the new Barcelona Central Archives, a research center on the campus of UAB, a social housing projects in Gava, and the rehabilitations of projects of multiple scales. On one hand, the work of Arquitectes belonged to the grand Spanish tradition of architecture. And on the other hand, what particularly impresses me is that some of the most compelling and mature work was done on the heels of the Spanish financial crisis between 2008 and 2014. While many architects retreated or struggled to adapt their work to the challenges posed by the scarcity of resources and opportunities, Arquitectes took the restraints and urgencies head on as opportunities and cultivated an authentic architecture of their own, founded on the primacy of construction and environment and contributing an important chapter to this history of Spanish architecture. Their works have received several national and international awards, including the European Award for Architectural Heritage Intervention, the Hugo Revolta Award for Social Housing, Public Prize for Fostering Art and Design, the Fritz Herger Prize for Brick Architecture, the Sicker Innovation Award, the MyPay Sustainable Building Award, and they was just awarded as the winner of the Berlin Art Prize of Architecture in 2021 by the Academie der Kunst on behalf of the state of Berlin. Besides the exemplar professional activities, they're also teaching in the ETSAF in Valles and ETSAP in Barcelona. And this semester, they're teaching in an option studio here at the GSD as the John Portman Design Critics in Architecture. So welcome, Roger. It is a pleasure to have you, and here's the floor.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for these beautiful words. We are very happy to be here. We are very happy to be teaching here in the GSD too. As you said, the organization asked me to make a description, a personal description for the people for low vision. So I am Roger. I'm a white man. I'm waiting I'm wearing a black sweater. Behind me there is a shelf system full of books. I'm wearing brown glasses and my hair is still quite black, but not my beard. So this is me. And I'm going to start sharing the presentation. So I would like to start showing, sorry, it's not working. Okay. I'd like to start with these words from Peter Brook, the theater director. When he was writing The Empty Space, this wonderful book, he was trying to describe how difficult it is to create a convincing play of theater. So how difficult it's to make possible that actors and actresses that are the material that the director of theater is using are able to express something special. How difficult is that this performance is becoming something alive? Also, how difficult is that there is a connection between the actors and the audience? So he's also defining very well a very mysterious message that we really like, that it's explaining that when this is happening, it's always related with some kind of magic moment where something invisible it's appearing, it's emerging from another level and it's becoming visible. So the lecture is a little bit about this, but trying to explain the same feelings, but in architecture. As an architect and as an office, we are absolutely interested in these magic moments that we can find in the good buildings, moments or places. Sometimes these magic moments where the invisible it's becoming visible, it's only for a few seconds. Sometimes it's something a little bit more stabilized. But as architects, we know that we are very, maybe too much focused on the visible part of architecture, but all of us, we know that there is something behind the visible one. There's a big part of the architecture that we cannot see without. And this part, it's something that it's been increasingly very interesting for us. This part can be considered a lot of invisible matter that we are using, like the air that it's surrounding me right now, or sometimes the sun radiation that sometimes it's invisible, or maybe also kind of emotional dimensions that are around buildings. So we are really convinced that it's important to find a way to connect with this kind of hidden layer of the invisible things that are not easy. They are not easy to touch. It's the access to this invisible part. It's not easy, but we are very interested on that, and we are convinced that by establishing these connections between buildings, users, environment, and all the things that are connecting visible and invisible, by doing this possible, then making this, when this is happening, there is a kind of a real feeling and a transformation of the meaning of the space. There's a kind of awakening of the emotional dimension, something that suddenly, something that it seems to be just matter, something that it looks like inert, that it's dead, it's becoming to start a little bit alive. So this kind of connections and this kind of latent energy of the invisible that every project has. It's what I will try to explain today with some examples. So the first approach to this idea of the invisible or this kind of flattened energy behind, it's when we start a project trying to find the simplest version of that. So try to make it very necessary, go to the necessary things, try to reduce everything, just using elemental things. That it's something that we really like. We like very much to use the typical things on architecture, like walls, doors, roofs, windows, things, very simple things that just combining them and going to the real necessary things when they are just exposed to reality and they are absolutely necessary, then they are becoming fundamental. They are usually having an extra functionality instead of doing one function. When you are reducing everything to a few pieces of matter, then this matter needs to be more multifunctional, and it's starting to go to the primordials and to the fundamental things. So this is a house, a very cheap house that we built a long time ago right now, and it's a very radical house. It's in a triangular plot. It's a very strange plot. The house, it's just following the shape of the plot, so that's the reason, the main reason why the house it's with this shape. There is also other reasons like the good relation with the direction of the wind and how it's producing a kind of a Venturi effect with his geometry. But the basic reason, it's a very elemental reason and necessary reason to reduce price. We were asking for a very simple construction. So simple construction can be sometimes easier if it's only with one floor. So we make the maximum footprint that it was legally possible. And inside that, this very simple decision to just structural walls, because the family was expecting some rooms. So instead of making removable walls, we decided to make structural walls. This was not very usual in Spain in those moments, but we were very interested on the definition of the space, when the space is defined by the structure. So we found that with this system, all the walls, they were going to be necessary, sometimes to stand the slab, sometimes to stabilize the others, but all these walls are making a structural contribution, and they are defining the space. And then there is this other layer of information that, because of the budget reduction, we went to this quite radical solution using the cheapest structural brick in the market and the cheapest beams. And instead of using a finishing material, we leave it naked or mostly naked. It's just with a white painting. So in this moment, we discovered that there is some kind of information on these walls that are starting to explain something else than the space. Obviously, the definition of the space is important, but there is something else here that's a kind of invisible element that is starting to appear, just a little bit in this case, but the presence of the bricks that on those moments was quite difficult to explain to a client, that maybe the bricks are going to be naked like that. So that they were starting to explain the behavior of the building, that is a real wall. This is a real structural wall, and it's starting to be convincing. So when you are visiting this building, everything it's convincing because it has the feeling of that it's necessary. So from outside, there's a very simple double facade, the ventilation system with the same brick twisted and with this specific triangular corners. Very simple detail. And this is the radicality of this house, that it's becoming something convincing because of the clarity and the connection with the real needs of the client. And there is this other approach that it's also helping us to connect with these invisible conditions. It's the redefinition of what is really valuable in architecture. Sometimes we are always affected by a lot of publications, a lot of references, a lot of things that are changing our perspective of things, but we are always trying to make a kind of a step back and try to redefine what is really important. And sometimes the answer every time is different because each size and each project it's different. But sometimes the answer it's so simple as to produce a pleasant space. Answers like that are the things that are and somehow fixing again the direction of what is important. So this is a house in Sant Cugat. It's a small village next to Barcelona. It's a quite nice plot. The house was also quite big, but even the plot, it's a big plot. It has this problem of producing a quite big footprint. So it was going to produce this strange division between a good south garden and something more strange on the north. So the strategy of the house is to produce these very clear 3 volumes and a kind of in between spaces that are connecting both sides of the garden. So inside the boxes, there is something similar, and it's built with the same materiality than the previous house. Even this house it has not the same budget problems, but it's done with the same materiality, the same structural logic. The spaces are defined by the structure. So, and all these volumes are occupied by the most domestic spaces. In the middle, there is the kitchen, some kind of bedrooms and studios. So the most domestic conditions are closed in these boxes, surrounded by walls with a smaller windows, producing a kind of a protection to the body. And on the other hand, there is these big openings here, this kind of big glasses that can be open 100% in summer, and in winter they are closed and they are catching the sun radiation, so they can be perfectly open, and the garden is connecting from one side to the other. So this is finally the effect of this house. This is the primordial house of this house, the important space where the important things are happening, probably also in the kitchen, but this is a very emotional space. It can be open, and it's producing this kind of connected porch to the garden. And this is the kind of important things that we like to redefine, this pleasant condition that probably everybody can feel comfortable here. It's not a strange architecture. It's probably connecting with vernaculars, moments that we can recognize, but finally the feeling of being protected just by a roof and with some plants and the breeze and the thermal conditions that are happening here, it's what is important. And on the other hand, there is this other dimension, more domestic, built with this very cheap materiality, but with this white painting, and these wood windows are becoming comfortable. This is the kitchen, a little bit higher, a little bit more communal, but still a domestic space. And you can realize that it's happening something here with these bricks that are not painted and the quality of this light. And this transition, it's coming to this space again. And here it's where this feeling of the invisible things are starting to be stronger. And our understanding of that is that this is happening because there is a strong connection with the outside. So when you are living here, you have the feeling of being closer to the real things, to the wild condition of real weather, instead of being closed inside a kind of hermetic box. So this strong connection and the materiality, the naked materiality, like you were exposed as your body, the body of the architecture is exposed to the exterior, and it's producing this kind of a waking of some emotional dimension that for us it's reducing the feeling of an object. This is not an object anymore. This is not only about how it's built, it's something else. It's what is happening here, and it's connecting with this invisible dimension, and it's creating something convincing that a lot of people can understand, that it's providing quality and a pleasant moments for living. So this is the house from outside. So another approach, always related to the previous one, it's the feeling of the behavior. So it's a little bit what I was trying to say now, that usually as architects, we are very focused on these visual parts. We understand things like objects, but there is a big part of the architecture that it's not exactly about the object, it's about the behavior, the things that are happening. There is a lot of things happening in a building. And in this case, this research center, it's a building that for us was a great experience to discover the potential of the behaviors of the building. And when we were working in this competition together with Data, we decide that this research building for this environmental institute, where they are researching on sustainability, they were really interested on that. So the challenge was quite important in terms of sustainability, but we didn't want to design an efficient building where you don't realize that this efficiency or this sustainability is happening. So we start to work on the idea that this behavior, the sustainability, should be understood as an experience in the space. So in a way that the users are able to understand at least some of this efficiency, some of this exchange with the environment, some of these behaviors that are happening in this building. So the idea of the building, this building, it's full of strategies, but the main strategy is this facade that can be open and closed. It's a kind of a transparent skin that in winter it's closed and in summer it's open, and can be open 100%. So it's a very porous skin sometimes, and sometimes it's an hermetic one. So it's producing this kind of behaviors, but this is just a drawing. And usually architects, we are designing maybe too much in drawings, but in this case, what is happening here, it's more or less what it's really happening. The building, it's closed on winter, so this is catching sun radiation and it's producing a kind of in-between air, a kind of a bioclimatic soap that it's surrounding the places where the people is working. So this amount of air that it's 50% of the building, it's more or less 10 degrees better than outside. So it's producing a kind of forever spring. So a really good weather with no active systems, just passive bioclimatics. And in summer, everything is opening. And because of the extra floor and this kind of a chimney effect on the roof, it's producing a lot of vertical ventilation and cross ventilation on the working areas. And there is also a kind of exchanging process with the soil. But finally, what is important here is that the building, in fact, it's behaving like that. So it's a very simple system. It's the blue line, the dark blue, it's the exterior temperature. The red one, it's the office's temperature inside the isolation boxes, and the in-between space is this orange-red line. And what is interesting here is the vertical blue lines that are defining when the greenhouse is open. So it's the most of the half of the year, it's summer period, it's open, and in winter it's closed. It's a very simple system. Maybe in between there is something else, but the building, it's just a consequence of that. So the plant, the experience of the space, it's about that. It's a kind of structure a little bit as a monastery. This is a research center, so each researcher has an individual or sometimes a collective room, like monks producing knowledge around some patios with some sharing areas in between with tables and some corners. This is changing in each plant. And there is all this air in between that it's including the patios and these kind of meeting areas in between, that it's the special moment of this project. So that the project, it's again behaving like that. There is a compact building in winter and a very open and exchanging building in summer. So in summer, everything is open, the air is crossing, and all the boxes are dissipating. In winter, everything it's more compact. So in between, there is this moment, the beautiful moment where the invisible is coming visible, probably, because there is a fantastic perception of that you are outside, because in summer, when the facades are open, the breeze is crossing the building, and there is a strong feeling that this is an exterior, and this feeling of being inside but outside, it's a very strong sensation, and also the quality of the light. I always explain that once I saw a butterfly crossing the building, because the building it's really open, and this is the powerful moment of this project. This is the roof, and these patios that are organizing everything, so a kind of a primordial spaces connecting everything, moving air from down to top, and surrounding these working areas, a kind of wood boxes where people is having his own place. And in between, all these kind of natural conditions, very affected by the exterior conditions. So the building, it's very, very sensible to what is happening. So when there is a lot of light, the natural light in the building, it's amazing. When it's a rainy day, it seems worse inside. So it's a very, very connected building with the weather conditions. And, and these are some labs and some offices. So people is working inside, and the building, it's absolutely exchanging and absolutely starting a dialogue and a behavior with the weather. So the idea of this exchange with the exterior conditions, it's also sometimes extended. So some other kind of natural phenomena, not only climatic, there's other dimensions and other natural phenomena that sometimes could be like gravity, or sometimes could be also some sound effects or some radiation, sun radiation. So when the buildings are connecting with this big natural phenomena, it's when there is the chance, there is the possibility that these invisible conditions that are hidden behind all our quotidianity of architecture can emerge. And when this kind of invisible is emerging, the interesting, the most exciting moments and potentials of architectures are happening. So this is a house in another city. It's Granollers. It's in the city of the center. So it's in the center of the city, and it's a very dense area. This is a typical plot, a long plot connecting to narrow streets, and the plot it's quite large, and it's a quite nice plot also. So the building, it's organized by a kind of sequence of spaces that are trying to take advantage of this luxury of having two entries. So there is a pedestrian entry in one side, and there is the cars entry, a kind of a garage here. So in between, there is a long sequence of different spaces with different characters, with different conditions, dimensions, and proportions. Sometimes indoor spaces, sometimes exterior, sometimes in between. And this is a little bit more clear in section where the spaces are starting to look for these interactions with this natural phenomena, natural light, sun radiation. So these entry spaces are like patios catching sun radiation here and here. There is some other conditions like underground patios, a kind of porch, an exterior room, and indoor spaces. So it's a large sequence of different qualities. And the sequence is something like that. There is an existing facade that it was supposed to be maintained. We maintain it, and when you cross this facade, you arrive to this very important space for this house. It's the whole, the entry of the house, but at the same time is where you can have breakfast, dinner. It's beside the kitchen. It's a bioclimatic space that can be open or closed with a retractile roof. So it's making a thermal contribution to the house, but at the same time, it's in summer, it's producing all these advantages from Mediterranean weathers, where patios are really fresh areas that are helping to create a nice ventilation inside the house. So here in this image, we can start to understand a little bit what this idea of the interaction with big natural phenomena. So the way that this space is built, the proportion, and the way that each brick it's one beside the other, it's starting to help us to make visible the invisible, because the natural light, for example, that it's going down through these walls, it's specifically shown by the way that these bricks and these textures are organized. So the proportion and everything, it's trying to explain that there is something in another scale, that it's starting to establish a dialogue with the building and the user. So there's a kind of a three-dimensional exchange between something quite bigger, which is natural light, and something much smaller, that it's the perception of the user, and in between the building exchanging with both. But at the same time, this wall is also connected with the idea of another big phenomena, that it's gravity. So the organization of these bricks is following a kind of degree organization, a degree of density. So the wall is organized by a kind of structural behavior. So the more dense bricks are on the bottom, and the less dense, the lightest bricks are on the top. So by this organization, the feeling of gravity, it's appearing here in this space. So something that usually it's not there, it's becoming visible. And this is also obviously making a contribution on the quality that you have inside, the quality of the light, the quality and the temperature of the air that it's coming inside, and the color of the landscape that it's producing through the window. So this is the sequence. And here we start to see again this kind of brick organization, that in detail you can understand that on the bottom there is the massive bricks, thinnest ones, with a lot of mortar in between, and on the top there is the lightest one with holes in between and much higher, so there is less mortar. So there is a degree of weight and a degree of resistance. So this is combined by a kind of in situ beams made with bricks. So a kind of a post-tense beams made with bricks and this kind of screws that are post-tensing the beams. And all that is organizing this quality of matter organization, where the behavior, the structural behavior, it's appearing here. Again, gravity and some stresses of the facade are explained, and it's producing something, it's changing, it's transforming the condition of the brick, something that is very artificial. It's starting to become specific in the site. It's starting to behave. It's starting to be alive, and something very inert like clay, it's starting to reborn and to have an opportunity to become something very specific, something that it has a certain character. So that the sequence of the space producing this porch and finally on the garage, that it's again a bioclimatic space, and this is the entry from the other side. So sometimes the approach to the invisible, it's quite different. Sometimes the potential of showing something invisible or hidden, it's by using the introduction of time. Time, it's a kind of a fourth dimension that it's very useful in producing this magical moments. So a lot of these magical moments that we can realize in some buildings, they are just happening because there is a strong moment of presence, a strong moment of living a real moment, a real experience in the present. so the notion of time, it's very important, but at the same time, there is an important notion for us about the capacity of the buildings of including time inside of them. This time, sometimes it's just showing the process of the construction. So the way that it's been built, like in the previous house, it's including time to the building. It's explaining what was happening during the construction, instead of hiding the process of the construction, showing what is happening. It's sometimes introducing times and extending the connection to something invisible that it's not still there, because the moment when the building was built, it's not already happening again, but you have a connection, an invisible connection to this moment by understanding how it's been built. And this is also happening sometimes, this kind of transhistorical dimension, that it's understanding buildings of something that it's happening through the history. This is especially happening when we are working on existing buildings. Like in this case, this is the Civic Center in Barcelona. It used to be a workers' cooperative. We won the competition. The building was in a very bad conditions inside, but the facade was a little bit in good condition. So we just made a few transformations on the facade, but from inside, the building was absolutely transformed by different activities during the years. The building was on those moments having an absolutely complete footprint of the plot because of different extensions. And our main purpose of this building was to create good conditions for the building, because on those moments that the building was absolutely closed and with no natural ventilation or even not enough natural light. But at the same time, it was a kind of a urban proposal to produce an extension of the urban space inside. So we did something like that. We make a demolition, a strategic demolition to produce a kind of a street inside of the building. And this demolition that was destroying the less interesting parts of the building was finally covered by a new roof and producing again a kind of a bioclimatic condition where this street is not an exterior street, it's something inside, but passive, bioclimatic, protected, but still a wild condition. And this very bad picture, it's from the beginning of the construction. That was the original condition of the building, and our transformation was something like that. We destroy some parts to provide natural light to make these amazing conditions of the environment coming inside the building. So then, because the demolition was not regular, you can see with color the different dimensions, geometries of this kind of corridor or indoor street. So finally, the image is something like that. It's the main space of the building. It's the demolition, the empty produced by the demolition. We just add a kind of circulation system inside, but trying to understand this building as a transhistorical condition. So all the things that were useful in the building, we keep it. We just destroy what it was necessary to destroy to provide this quality. And at the same time, then the building, it's instead of understanding the building of clearly an extension, we understand it as a continuity. So we start to add new materials in a way that it was not very clear if these materials were existing or new materials. So it's a kind of a combination where we are trying to give value to the existing, and we are trying to add new things with the sensibility of being or working in dialogue with the existing. So then there is a kind of a dialogue between different architectural periods, everything together, and sometimes we can realize that these new columns are new and the existing wall is old, but for the users of this building, this is still a continuity of the existing building. Inside, there is obviously more standard spaces where the main activities are done. But the main space is this primordial space where there's again this connection with the most big natural phenomena like natural light and thermodynamics, how the heat is going up and all that. And this combination of what is new and what is existing that sometimes you don't realize. For example, in this picture, this is a new beam and this is an existing beam. Obviously, this is a new column, but this is very confusing, and it's producing this idea of the transhistorical that in a certain way, it's using all the information and all the invisible connections that are that we are using from the original building. So in this case, the waking of the invisible, it's trying to take advantage of all these fabulous textures and memory of the building. The idea of belonging, it's something that is also very interesting for us because as I was saying at the beginning, all the projects has this kind of potentials, this kind of latent energy that should be solved in a certain way. And especially the sites, the different plots and sites have this condition. So for us, it's very important to design something that it will belong to the existing site. So usually the most important thing in a design process is just to discover what was already there instead of adding a lot of things or creating new strategies where it's not necessary. So in this case, this is a house that it seems to be an existing wall, but this is a completely new wall. It's a contemporary house. It's a construction, a new construction. But the story of this wall, it's a little bit more complex. It's a very beautiful village. This village, it has this very narrow streets, and all the center of the village is built with this stone system. Sometimes it's a house, sometimes it's a fence, but it's always the continuity with all the streets. It's defined by these stones, and that wall was the ones that was enclosing our plot. Inside it was just some trees, but that was what we found. It was really beautiful, but the problem was that for the urban planning, we need to make a bigger street, which is quite stupid because the most beautiful thing in this village is this very narrow street. But they were asking to make a bigger street, so the existing wall should be demolished. So we demolish it, but we keep all the stones and we try to reuse it. So this is the existing wall, and this is the new house. The new house, it's just affected by this context, affected of the idea of the existing wall and all the surroundings, and it's trying to become the wall that it used to be, and the house is trying to be a kind of a wall. So the house is becoming very large, enclosing the patio. It's working very well because the patio it's facing south. So we are, with this strategy of working on the edge, we are producing a very big patio inside, and the wall it's very dense next to the street with the small windows, and it's very open to the garden. So there is a structural system that it's working in a U system, and then there is a long sequence again where the radical condition of having this large house it's starting to produce some exciting problems. We have a main entrance here. There is a living area here with the kitchen, dining room, and all that. And then if you want to go to your room, you have to cross this exterior porch. It's protected from rain, but it's open. And then you across several rooms, depending on which is your room. And this is working with this very radical version of a corridor. It's a kind of gallery with no doors in between the beds and these corridors, but they are very huge. They are very generous. They are catching sun radiation. It's a very wonderful space that can be open 100% and becoming a big porch. And then the position of the bathrooms and everything, it's improving this idea of the density of the wall. So this wall, it's built with the existing walls and this kind of mix with the local materials like earth and some, instead of cement, we were using lime with the traditional cement, and also some recycled glass that it was working as isolation. So finally we produced this kind of mortar that it has a very, very light condition. It's full of air because these bubbles of recycled glass are working as isolation. So the wall is a combination of this mortar and recycled stones built in a technique like rameter with different layers of 20 centimeters with a typical framework as in concrete, but built in layers. And then all the house it's adapted to the real thermal and behavior of the house. So sometimes the wall it's just mortar, so it has a very good isolation condition. Sometimes when we are facing the street, we are putting the stones next to the street, and finally we will destroy the surface in order to visualize what is happening inside. And when we are inside the building, when we don't need isolation, but we want this thermal mass, we want this heat capacity to storage the heat. So we are filling the walls with a lot of stones. In fact, you don't realize, except from outside, we broke the surface of this concrete. You can see here how around the windows, there is still the original texture of the framework, but the rest of the facade, it's broken. It's suddenly destroying just in the surface, and then appears the existing stones producing something that it links with the context, but inside is the opposite condition. There is a very open structure and a very open system of windows that you can open 100%, and again the quality and the pleasant conditions of living and the idea of learning to live in a different way, it's starting to make sense here. And there is a quality and a density in these spaces because of the weight of and the texture of these walls, and also this movement of air and all that it's producing a really nice quality. So this is the kind of material that it's made. It's in between concrete and earth and lime, and it's producing a sequence of rooms with this kind of gallery. This is a a fantastic moment when we were invited by the clients, some people of the office here, testing if the house is working well or not, and it's really working. And this is this corridor that it belongs to each room, but at the same time it's a corridor. So this is a very radical functionality, but the client is really happy with that. This is working as a weekend house right now. So that's why we did this kind of a double bed system, and one family can be living here as guests, but it could be also used by the sons and the daughters of the clients. So again, this very convincing condition and atmosphere that it's produced by the density of these walls, this kind of cave, and the quality of light and the movement of air, and all these qualities that are awakening this emotional dimension of architecture because of this strange condition of the invisible that it's starting to become visible. This is the main bedroom. And from outside, again, this texture that finally it's really becoming convincing. It's something that even it's a contemporary wall, that even it has a good isolation, it's still connected with the existing walls. And right now it's a little bit white because it's with lime, the same as these existing ones, but the difference is that these ones are a little bit more dirty by the past of the years. So in a few years, I imagine that everything will be very similar. So this idea is another way of trying to connect with the invisible. This is something that it's worry us a lot. It's the idea of that buildings are every time more artificial. They are more, they are providing comfort because of artificial machines, mechanical systems that are producing the illusion that we are in a good place, in a good space, but in fact, it's a horrible design usually, and it's only working because of the machines. So we are always trying to avoid mechanical systems as much as possible. So in this building, it's again an existing building. Finally, it was only the facade who was protected by the heritage. So it's a triangular plot again. And inside there is a kind of a school for adults. It's a very conventional distribution somehow. It's a corridor and some rooms, but then there is other things that are not so conventional. There is a kind of patio here and a kind of patio on the other side. And this building was built understanding that it was very important to reuse the existing wall, to reuse it in a way that it makes sense. So to use it as a structural wall as it used to be. And all the new walls are made and following and growing with the same logic. So this is one of the new walls. In this case, we were also using these glass bricks because the original factory that used to be a factory of glass production. So we did this kind of small detail that it's not really important, but it's introducing a little bit of glass in between bricks. But what is important in this building is the things that are happening here in the roof, and also what is happening under the roof. Under the roof, there is a very massive building, very, very massive building. And on the top, there is this kind of chimneys that I'm going to explain later. So this is the relation between the existing facade and the new facade, everything working together as a structural system and with this kind of same degrees of bricks that we've been using in other projects. So this project, it's much more easy to understand the reasons of this project in this section. So that this is an adult school full of small rooms with a lot of people inside. These people is producing a lot of internal heat, and also it's breathing and it's producing pollution. So the main problem of this building, as a lot of buildings, it's to create a renovation of the quality of the air. So we need ventilation. And also in summer, we need dissipation. We need to dissipate all this internal heat produced by people. So that was the idea of these chimneys. These chimneys appears in order to trying to avoid the typical mechanical systems to move air for dissipation or for renovation of the quality of the air. And these solar chimneys, it's a kind of thing for the ones that you maybe don't know what is a solar chimney. It's working with the very basic principles. It's a transparent layer. The sun radiation, it's coming inside. Then inside there is a black layer. Because it's black, the temperature is increasing a lot, between 50 and 80 degrees, some in the top of the summer. And this air, because it's very hot, wants to go up, because the air is always going, the warm air is going up. So this is sucking the air that is inside. So this is producing a kind of a natural engine. Instead of using a mechanical engine, we are using a natural engine with the energy of the sun, and this is able to move 10 times the volume of the building in 1 hour in the top of the summer. So then the air is coming from the bottom of the building. It's a little bit refreshed. It's going to this kind of in-between space. This in winter, this is catching sun radiation, so it's a little bit improving the temperature, and then goes inside the rooms, and it's sucked by the chimney, so producing something like that. And then the building, it's working with this double facade. So these are the patios, the in-between spaces where the sun radiation is catched, at the same time the air is flowing. So in fact, this is a big tube where the classrooms are connecting, and the classrooms are living in front of this existing facade. And in the other side, there is the same situation with the entry patio, that it's this one. This is the patio when you enter in the building. And on the top, there are the chimneys, and you can see here the transparent layer, the black layer, and how the air can go up. And on the top, there is also this kind of Venturi effect, because at night it's producing a kind of night free cooling. This is being obviously designed by a simulation that it's defining what is the perfect geometry. In fact, this is not exactly the perfect, this is the possible geometry. And what is happening here that it's really amazing is that the geometry of these chimneys are following the quantity of air that we want to move during the year. So in summer, when the sun is really strong and vertical, the geometry is catching a lot of energy and it's moving a lot of air. The rest of the year, it's a kind of a degree and transformation in order to reduce the volume and to get to the lowest moment on winter, when we just want to create to exchange the minimum air to have the enough quality of the air. So finally, these chimneys are a little bit what I was telling at the beginning. It's an elemental thing, that it's a roof that it's protecting from rain, but at the same time it's something else. It's the way that the building is breathing. So the building, it's absolutely connected with another bigger phenomena. It's using the sun as a natural engine, and it's becoming something that it seems to be alive and without mechanical systems. And the last project, it's this about this idea of the invisible scale, because all the project has some scales that we don't realize sometimes because they are very small. There's a lot of things happening in a non-visible scale, but sometimes also in some other much bigger scales. This is a project that we finished 1 year ago. It's a winery in a very small village in Catalonia. This winery is just something strange because it's in the center of the village instead of being in the countryside. It's just beside the church, so it was a very strong condition that was reducing some possibilities of the project. So usually sailors are and wineries are underground because they want to use the temperature of the floor, but in this case that was not possible, or at least not a lot, because the church, it's very close and it's very heavy construction. And so we decide to make this basic strategy. This is the maximum footprint of the plot. This is on the ground floor. This is the maximum that you can build on the first and second floor. So we decide to make a kind of two qualities of the space. There is the black area. It's the wine production. So this moment where we need a very thermal control conditions, and the white area, it's an area that can be mostly exterior. It's a place for logistics and a place for the visits and all the tastings and all that. So there is a strong division between a very thermodynamic moment in the big volume, and then something that it's a kind of a street again, that it's around the building and the neighbors. So the building already have a small underground area for the barrels, which is the most delicate moment. So this is in connection with the soil and with the temperature underground. But over that, the main challenge of this project is to produce the same quality that we have usually underground, but in this condition. So trying to don't use mechanical systems. This was the big challenge of this project. So this is the underground with the barrels and the storage system, and the street level. It's producing this extension of the street. So from this part, you can enter and you have a kind of continuity of the street, having this space for logistics, and to visitors from this point of view, they can see what's happening inside. And there is a kind of different levels with the stairs that you can use, and you can have tasting areas. And there is also some indoor rooms that are surrounding the delicate moment of the tanks that should be very protected from this very warm weather that it's in Gratallops. And you can see here that there is a very amazing, huge walls that are protecting that. And the experience of the building, it's something like that. It's a building that it's in a very vernacular village. So we try to establish again a dialogue with the existing. So even this is a very contemporary construction, it's still trying to establish this dialogue with the existing. And this is the main volume, the church. So I'm just finishing. This is the entry. This is this kind of a street producing these in-between conditions. This is protected from rain, but absolutely open, but it's producing the kind of fresh conditions necessary for the reception of the harvest. Inside you can see the tanks. So in between there is these levels where you can start to have tastings and access. You have the access to the indoor rooms. So this is protected by roofs, and it's attached to the neighbors. So these are the kind of qualities that are happening here. It's a nice place for summer where the most of the visitors are coming. So these different layers are connecting neighbors and a big volume. And it's producing this kind of sun protection and this fresh condition for the green roofs and this final patio that has different levels. And it has also this kind of a small auditorium where they are making explanations. So from outside the volume, it has this contextual relation with existing, and inside the big box, there's the important challenge and the things that are happening. There is these big walls. This is a 7 layers wall with some air in between. There is also this kind of a strange roof made with bricks again. And this is working like that. When the conditions of the street are enough fresh, the air it's coming through these walls, and this fresh air it's keep it in the bricks. So then the building it's keeping a little bit more fresh, but sometimes this is not possible. And the strategy of the big quantity of inertia and the activation of this inertia by natural ventilation, it's not possible. So when this is happening, the ceiling is starting to improve another strategy. This kind of beams made with bricks, it's a kind of a radiator that it's connected with these layers of walls in the facade. So the air can move like that, but on the top of that there is two layers of a roof. This roof is working as a kind of a very flat swimming pool, 10 centimeters of water that at night it's refreshed by the radiation of the sky, and during the day it's going down by gravity inside the isolation. So it's in direct contact with all these bricks. So all these bricks are refreshed by this process that it's running every day in summer. So at night it's dissipating, during the day it's refreshing. So this is moving, it's producing an activation of the air that it's expanding the fresh of the water and the sky to the walls, and finally it's refreshing the tanks. So the tanks are refreshed by this radiator, that is refreshed by this swimming pool, that is refreshed by the universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger, for wonderful lecture and a great cross section of the work that you have done in with the office. Well, I think maybe we can start with some of the questions that have been raised by the audience. I will start with one by Julian Redford-Sader. Firstly, thank you for the great lecture, inspiring work. And he said he'll be interested in how you deal with the invisible qualities during the design process, and especially in the early stages of design. How do you visualize them for yourself and how for the others? Do you make design decisions in an evidence-based way or along some rules of thumb?
So that this is depending, and it's also changing with the age. So it's been some moments in the office that we've been experimenting a little bit more with some kind of softwares. We are still doing that, and we are checking sometimes in a kind of a scientific approach what is happening and how the invisible can be maybe visible. But on the other hand, there is also this very obvious approach that it's coming from the experience of being in certain buildings, visiting good buildings, and trying to discover things there. So I think that by the time the idea of the experience and the memory of some of those experiences, it's getting more importance. And obviously, every time we have a little bit more skills on that, especially on trying to understand thermodynamic approaches. But there is other things that sometimes it's difficult to explain in a lecture, but this emotional dimension of architecture, it's sometimes we also discover in our own buildings after designing them when they are already built. Sometimes visiting our buildings, we are discovering things. So I think that visiting buildings, it's very important for having to starting to increase the knowledge of what is happening in buildings.
Thank you, Roger. And there's another question that is, there are two questions, but related, but also related to visiting. One is from Natalia Pekova, who said, could you say a few words about your relationship to the construction process? Do you follow your own construction sites? Does this continue to inform your design work? And then another question by Brishita Data, I hope I pronounced the name right, is how hard is it to find construction workers to use mixed techniques, if you will, and use materials such as earth and stone and bricks? Do you train them or do you work closely with them?
Okay, now we are not, I think that we are not in this kind of countries where you still have the possibility of finding really traditional builders. We are building in Europe, but it's true that it's probably Spain. It's something in between. There is still a little bit of tradition on masonry and brick stone construction, but every time it's more difficult to find people that it's prepared to do this kind of things. When we are doing this kind of things, we are selecting a lot the kind of construction company. And we are producing a lot of drawings to make that possible, to make it very easy for the company. So each brick is drawn, absolutely, each one. So it's an amount of work and a very precise work, where then the following of the construction site, it's made by us and by some of our collaborators, and every time it needs to be more intense. So at the beginning we were a lot on the construction side. We also learn a lot from that. By the time and when the office is starting to get bigger, we are just combining a little bit, but we are still a lot compared to probably a lot of the bigger firms. I think that we are a lot on the construction side.
Thank you. There's a question from Bradley Farish, who asks, you often refer to the idea of a building or an element being convincing. Can you elaborate on that idea of convincing? Like, what does convincing mean to you, and why is that important to you?
Well, very difficult. It's what I've been trying to explain during all the lecture, but convincing, it's something that when you are there, it's explaining you a kind of a truth. We know that there is no realities and truths, but finally, all of us, sometimes we have the feeling of something honest or something that it's real, or it's very difficult to define, because obviously all these words are not correct, because reality it's much more complex than that. But when something is convincing, it's because there is no tricky behind. It's the things that are there are real, are honest, are exposed. So for us, it's something like that.
I mean, yeah, it's like, I understand. It's like one of these questions, like, how do you know when you fall in love, right? You can't, But I think it's interesting when you also talked about visiting other buildings, so when you divorce yourself from your own labor of work, and what are the moments of other buildings that are convincing to you, whether it be historical or contemporary buildings?
It's a little bit also like the idea of the character of things, that it's what is interesting of this definition of character is that cannot be defined. So what is beautiful of this kind of approaches is that they are a kind of understandings that cannot be understood only as in a rational way. So the character of something, it's something that we cannot define, but it's there.
Well, I have a question regarding center versus periphery. I think at least in this country, a lot of Spanish architects we know of were either from ETSAB or ETSAM, like in the central in Barcelona or from Madrid. And somehow you always have that idea that being in Sabadell, being near the center, but not quite the center. We're teaching at Vallejo. And I'm curious of this because in the past we had this conversation with architects like Peso von Ellighausen. They talked about the advantage of being in Concepcion and not Santiago, or RCR, being away from the center. How do you feel your relationship, like being close to and having your own space and room?
Probably this is not a very important thing, but it's, I don't know, probably it's it. So in our case, at the beginning, it was an advantage maybe because living not in the center, I think it was a little bit easy to start, to get the first commissions, this very difficult moment at the beginning of the offices. I think that was an advantage. Right now, I'm not sure if there is any difference between us and any other architect in Barcelona or Madrid, but it's true that our understanding of what is a city, what is a construction, maybe a little bit, a few connection with vernaculars. I don't know. Maybe there is something, but I'm not sure.
No, I'm interested because I think also for a lot of our students, I think there's a benefit of starting being not necessarily in the limelight, on the spotlight, and you have time to mature, and slowly graduate towards the center. But I think we have time for one more question. I'd like to, this is one by Jack Lin, and said, have you given thought to applying your approach to exposing the interior of buildings to the local climate in more humid tropical or subtropical areas outside of the Mediterranean? Any such projects on the boards? Because I'm also curious, and adding on to Jack's question, as your projects begin to change in scale, have you also begin to think about changing in terms of locale and climates and such?
We are mostly working next to Barcelona, but it's true that right now we are starting a few projects not far away from Barcelona. We are doing a competition in Bordeaux, and we are also starting to negotiate some other possibilities abroad, but we know that it's quite difficult to have this very intense control of construction sites if we go abroad. So we just want to do it when the conditions are the proper conditions for that. But we are not close, and we are very interested to work in a different weather condition, because then the challenge, it's fantastic.
Well, I think as we all remember the famous story that Immanuel Kant never left his hometown of Königsberg more than 100 kilometers in his entire life. So maybe that's not a bad thing for architects. But on that note, thank you, Roger. It's a real pleasure to have you here at the GSD this term, and thank you for a fantastic lecture.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Take care.